And I'm really excited about today's presentation because on Tuesday, we talked about online presence and how to make sure you don't have much digital dirt. Today, we're going to have a lot more fun, I hope. I had some fun on Tuesday. But today, I think we're going to be more hands-on in terms of talking about concrete things that you can do to bait and hook employers, whether it's from making them interested in you after they've already received their resume and when they're on the verge of making an offer and deciding between two candidates, to whether it's a matter of someone discovering you online, and we're going to talk about ways that they can find you. And I think that one of the most important things that I want to talk to you about today is the difference between applying for jobs traditionally, the resume cover letter on campus recruiting route, and through and just being present on social media, because I think it's a very different experience and the expectations are very different. So one of the things in the US in particular, which I know other cultures, students from other cultures often struggle with, is the American version of I'm the best. That's often expected in a cover letter. So, you know, I am confident that my skills align perfectly with the qualifications in this position. You know, you know, here's what I've done, and here's how this fits this job. And I think one of the things in social media is if you talk about yourself all the time, or you use those, you present yourself as overconfident, which sometimes is necessary in terms of just showing an employer all the skills and qualifications you have, you will turn people off. So in many ways, it's as important to talk as much about what other people need, if not more, and in finding out what employers are looking for, as it is to present what you have to offer. So that's kind of, I mean, that's definitely true in the job search process as well, but it's very transparent to people online. Just as if when you use the Dartmouth Alumni Career Network, if you call someone and say, I'm calling for a job, it's a much harder sell than if you say, I'm calling to learn about your job, what you do, and how you do it. So that's something I want you to keep in mind as we move throughout today. As I mentioned on Tuesday, social media is viral. It took radio 38 years to reach an audience of 50 million, and it took Facebook 2 years to reach that same goal. And within 6 years of its founding, I think this year Facebook will be 6, it now reaches 300 million. So it really is exponential. Exactly a year ago, on January 29th, I believe, of last year, a fellow I now call a friend asked a question on Twitter in 140 characters. He said, what would happen if each one of us offered to help one other person with a job? Are you game? That's it. 140 characters, asked the question about 9 o'clock in the morning. He thought of it the night before just as he was going to sleep. By noon, he had a Facebook group, a LinkedIn group, a Twitter presence, and a name of Job Angels. He'd created this with a group of other people who'd gotten together on Twitter. That weekend, they were in the Los Angeles Times. When I met with him in October, he had 30,000 members of his various networks, and 1,000 people had found work through his grassroots effort that was started with that one question. So I think social media can be incredibly powerful, and in some ways it can be almost retro in terms of it's almost a return to to the idea of hunting and gathering, because people commune, they talk about a common issue. There are social movements that happen very fast. I haven't been on Twitter very much this week because I've been spending time with you. But when I have logged in, there's an amazing amount of relief work that's going on for Haiti, just at rapid pace. And I think thinking about social media and the idea of tribes is a really important concept. As I mentioned, I think social media is really sexy. Lean back is like watching TV. So if you got to school in September, you submitted your resume once to a resume site for jobs, you walked through the career fair, you talked to 2 employers, and you haven't done anything since, that's a lean back, passive response. Lean forward is a very active response. It's the phrase typically associated with social media because you're interacting all the time. Every time you post a status update on Facebook or on LinkedIn, every time you respond to a comment from one of your friends, that's a lean forward response. It's basically saying, I want to engage with you. And that's at the heart of social media. It really can transcend boundaries and can help connect you to people in your field. And so while you may feel like you're one of 5 people at Dartmouth who's studying your specific research area, social media is an opportunity for you to have conversations with many people who share your interests. And I think in the process of that discussion, you can become very real. I don't know if many of you read The Velveteen Rabbit as a child, but I feel like social media is very much about being real, putting that face or the sound of your voice behind your resume. So making you seem more three-dimensional to the people who will potentially hire you later on. So today my agenda is to talk about how to build a professional presence on 3 social media platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, how to attract leads and employers through these platforms, and how to optimize your exposure. So the first thing I'm going to cover is Facebook. Facebook, as many of you know, started as an online version of the college Facebook at Harvard. Dartmouth was one of the first schools, I believe, invited into Facebook. I learned about it in 2004. And it's a relatively inexpensive site for employers to advertise job leads. And last year, a fellow named Willie Franzen, who has a website called One Job, One Day, or One Day, One Job, and an internship site of a similar name, ran an experiment where he had, I think, 5 or 6 students post ads on Facebook to see if they would get hired. It's relatively inexpensive for the students. I think, in fact, he reimbursed them, but it doesn't cost very much. He got the students who did it received a fair amount of interest, but no one got hired off of it. But it was an interesting technique because I think many people are using social media for Hire Me campaigns, and I've seen people generate amazing returns by doing something different. So one of the students I wrote a blog post about recently graduated from BU last spring, and he created a musical cover letter, which landed him on CNN within the week. He got a lot of interview leads. He didn't find a job yet, but he's gotten enough freelance work to really support him for a few months, and he has a great story to tell for the rest of his life. So the question is, are sort of Hire Me campaigns gimmicky, and can they work? In the case of the Facebook fairy, that was an accident. He never wanted to be. The Facebook fairy, for those of you who missed the story, was an intern who skipped Halloween, or skipped out on work over Halloween, said he had a family emergency, and posted an update of himself dressed as a fairy on Facebook, and his boss saw it, and he got laid off. And he didn't get laid off. It was a little harsher than that, and it went all over the world. With the Hire Me campaign, I've seen some people do some very smart ones and land jobs. I think there's a woman that I'm in touch with named Jamie Varon, who created a campaign last spring called TwitterShouldHireMe.com. She got a website. She showed the value that Twitter can bring to employers and to companies. She really approached it from an academic perspective. She got a lot of interviews from it. She got some job leads. She got some offers that she turned down. She's now doing freelance work. She's a graphic designer in Rome and paying her way. It worked very well for her. But I think if you do it, and if people do it, they have to be able to have a plan to back it up, and they have to be able not to just go in and talk about, oh, isn't it cool I created a website, or I made a musical video. They have to still be able to talk about the substance of their job. But that was a great question. In general, on Facebook, hiring managers and recruiters do not want to be your friend. I think we talked about this the other day, but universally I found this to be true. You can be a fan of companies. You can connect with companies that way. You can also belong to groups and be an active participation in wall discussions. How do you define boundaries if someone else with a company or someone in a position of influence to hire you contacts you through Facebook and that's your personal line?
My friends and family, and
Yeah. I think the response to that I would give is to write the person back, because you can always directly send a message to that person and tell them that you'd prefer to connect through LinkedIn.
I have LinkedIn account now. I was playing with it. So.
Oh, good. So I'd say I'd prefer to connect with you on LinkedIn. Very interested in following up with you, and then include your LinkedIn URL at the end of your signature. Okay, so the question is, how do you tell when a company is legitimate? Legitimate or not? My response is almost always to Google a company. Many times if a company or a name is fraudulent, it will come up. The other piece is never to give out your personal information. But
you upload your resume and then it's there.
But they cannot have your social security number.
Okay.
They cannot have your date of birth. Those are the two pieces of information I never ever recommend you give away. Employers frequently check Facebook profiles before they hire, so you want to monitor that. Some strategies for luring employers through Facebook include growing your community through their friend finder, joining groups, participating in wall discussions, and sharing information and resources with friends. So, for example, if something really exciting happens in your field, or you're at Thayer School, for example, and your friends get in popular mechanics with their invention, the gyro bike, post that on your wall. Talk about it. That allows people a chance to get a feel for what you're doing at school, and also increases people's awareness of what you do. I have a friend in Ohio who got laid off last October. It took him 7 days to find a new job, and he did it through status updates on Facebook. Really? Wow. He wrote that he'd been laid off. He said he was looking for a job. He was very specific about what he was looking for. A former colleague happened to be on, connected him with an interview. He found a job making more money than he made before. He was also very active on LinkedIn and Twitter. And so I think in some ways he'd foreseen the possible that he was possibly going to be laid off. So he was very careful in terms of developing his community. But once it was there when it needed to be there for him. And I think that's also a big lesson that I heard when I was in the course of doing research for my book on this job seekers on Twitter, was that people who had already developed a strong community had much better luck finding jobs because they had those connections already in place. Even if you post your privacy settings, it's just really important to make sure you know what's on there and have all appropriate
Even for the good
pieces.
things.
Even for the good things. Well, and I mean, I think that people aren't going to not hire you for the good things. And people are really only going to not hire you for the really bad things. But it's always better to just know that whatever you put online, aside from online banking that's beyond lots of security walls, isn't completely safe. So LinkedIn is the hands down most popular employer favorite for scouting new talent. So if you do one thing, or if you remember one thing from all 3 workshops that I've given you, well, I'd like you to remember 2 things. One is the importance of monitoring your online presence, and the second is probably the importance of using LinkedIn. I just wrote a book on Twitter and how you can use Twitter for your job search, and I still say that LinkedIn is probably more important overall in terms of your presence. If the median age of a LinkedIn user is 38 with a household income of $100,000, why would students or individuals not in that age demographic want to participate? And my answer to that is a simple one. These are often people who are going to hire you. And I think there was a job bite survey done, I mentioned it on Tuesday, of small to mid-sized companies. About 80% of those companies were using social media as a recruiting tool, and 95% of those companies were using LinkedIn. So it's really important to complete your summary on LinkedIn, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So LinkedIn, again, is described as the Facebook for business. The idea is that you connect with people who you know and trust. So both people have to agree before they connect. It's similar to Facebook in that respect. They have a lot of different features. I think Dartmouth has, as of last fall, Dartmouth had 65 different groups. And there's certainly probably more than that now that you can join, many of which you're eligible to join and participate in discussions with. That's just an example for Dartmouth. Your professional associations have groups. They're all different types of discussion forums going on. And you can participate in those groups, meet people, make connections who can help you in your job search. And there's also a question and answer feature of the site. And through the question and answer site, you can ask questions. As I mentioned on Tuesday, I have a friend that I met in the process of doing some research who got a job through asking a question on LinkedIn about, well, she asked a question on LinkedIn and Twitter about whether or not she should go to law school or not. She was a senior at Chapel Hill at the time. And I think that for students especially, questions can be a great way to gather information, because when you ask a question to the community, hundreds of people, well, not hundreds, sometimes hundreds of people answer one question, but a lot of times you'll get up to 15 to 20 people answering your questions and weighing in, and then at the end of that, you get the opportunity to rank an answer and choose who has the best answer, and people who have the best answers are designated as subject matter experts in a particular area. So you can also ask questions for your field, which can also be very helpful for you. Other ways of connecting include forging connections. So every time you join LinkedIn, let's say Carrie and I will probably be connected very soon. We will. And so I will be able to see all of Carrie's connections, and Carrie will be able to see all of my connections. And Carrie's connections to me will be second-degree connections, because I don't know the people who Carrie knows. So they'll be second-degree connections. And then third-degree connections are the people who know Carrie. So you can see people within 3 degrees, and oftentimes if you have 50 contacts, but those 50 contacts may have a reach within 3 degrees of 207,000 people. So it's a very powerful tool for your job search. And when you're networking, you can then find out who is at the company, who's in your sphere of networking, and request an introduction to that person. And then let the person know that you've applied for a job at their company at the same time you send an application. And it's a really good technique to further yourself in your job search. So the question is not specifically about LinkedIn, but about the protocols for thank yous.
Well, you can say thank you through LinkedIn now.
You can say thank you through LinkedIn, but if you've had an interview, a lot of times the best practice is to get that person's email address or get that person's business card during the interview. So it's a more direct follow. So you're not necessarily, like an introduction on LinkedIn is if Carrie knows Catherine, but I don't know Catherine, and I want to reach Catherine. So I would say to Carrie, would you be so kind to introduce me to Catherine? Because I can see that the two of you know each other. Usually when you interview, you're going to meet those people in person. So it's a slightly different thing, but the answer to your question is I still think handwritten thank you notes can go a long way, especially if you know that the hiring window, the timeline for the employer to hire is longer. If somebody says, I'm going to make a decision in 24 hours or 48 hours or 3 days, I always email a thank you. In terms of LinkedIn, I'm going to show you some screenshots in just a minute, but the key points that I want to drill home are really the importance of completing your profile and being ruthless about your spelling and grammar, just as you are on your resume, because a lot of people are going to see this, and chances are good that more people are going to see your LinkedIn profile than are going to see your resume to a great extent. So you want to be very careful about that. There are great ways to monitor job leads and listings through LinkedIn. They have a jobs tab. They are also connected to a number of sites, including the aggregator, which I recommend a lot, Indeed.com. So if you go to Indeed.com and you're using their Jobs Insider tool, it will say, okay, there's a job at Accenture, and you know Andy Robinson at Accenture through Carrie Landers. That's a really good way to monitor leads and to sort of tie in connections through LinkedIn. Also, as I mentioned, I think one of my biggest tips is to really use your LinkedIn URL in your email signature. It's a way to follow up with networking contacts without attaching your resume. So for example, if you're cold calling someone to ask for an informational interview, you can simply include your LinkedIn URL in your email signature. So I recommend that a lot. This is how you sign in to LinkedIn or to create an account. I've just made some simple screenshots. It's a really nice system. Basically, it'll ask you some series of questions as you log in. It'll ask you your field of interest. You'll get a number of questions. I made a screenshot here with the example that we used the other day on globalization. You can see who you know. You enter your email address here. This was Jane Smith Globalization. A password that will basically access your Gmail account or other accounts and say, these people you already know are on LinkedIn. Do you want to send them an invitation? And the best way to send invitations is to customize it. You can either create a template, which it will allow you to do, or send individual messages, or the final option is just to send a blanket, I'd like to connect with you on LinkedIn. I really recommend sending a personal message because I think it makes a big difference. Anytime you can send a personal response in a job search, it shows people you care. And if I'm on the other side of the hiring desk and I'm looking at 50 different resumes and I've seen that someone took the time to say hello, to get to know me, to express their interest, even a sentence or two, that shows me a strong demonstration of interest that maybe I haven't seen from the other candidates. So I think it's a nice personal touch. Once you enter your basic information, you'll have the opportunity, see if I can make this work a little bit. This is my first time with this particular tool. You can edit your contact settings and tell them when you're comfortable at having your profile released. So if you're drafting it for a while, you can mark it as closed. My favorite piece of it is right here, which you can hardly see. It's a little PDF icon. And that PDF icon, essentially, when you enter your information in your LinkedIn profile, it makes a PDF of your information. It will actually now, if you add upload your resume right here, which says import your resume to build a complete profile, it will pull and scan from your resume that you have your existing resume. You'll have to update it, but it'll help you set up your profile. And then once this is finished and you have this downloadable profile, again, this is something employers can download. This is also something you can send to other people. So let's say you're on a trip, you don't have access to your own email account, you've got access to a friend's email account, someone emails you and asks you for your resume, you can just send them your LinkedIn profile. So it's very nifty in that respect. They also ask you if you'll add a website. And the website that I recommend you add, if you don't have one already, is either your academic department, if you're a PhD student, or if you have a Google profile with additional information about you, you can also just link to your own Google profile. You don't have to create your own website to list it as a website. If you've had an internship or a job somewhere, or you're currently employed, you can also list a company website so that people can get more information about where you are and what you're doing. Should you be doing this if your true goal is to have an academic position? I would say yes, because chances are good that whether you're looking for an academic job or an industry job, people are going to be Googling you. And especially if you're a PhD student and you share your name with other people in your field, and you have only a couple of scientific papers, this is an opportunity for you to essentially build a portfolio for yourself. So for example, if there are papers that are online that you want to draw people's attention to, you can mention that in your summary. You can also include that in your list of websites here. And you can even, there's also a portfolio option that allows you to upload slides. So let's say you're presenting at the graduate student poster session. You can show snapshots of that or samples of your work, and all of that can enhance your credentials online. Finally, there's a piece right here that says customize your URL. In your profile, you can customize it and edit your own URL. You can also update your headline to attract attention. So for example, when you enter your information, it asks you just for a quick summary statement. The default for many of you might be graduate student at Dartmouth College. What you can also do here is you can spice that up. So for example, here I had Jane Smith in globalization. I changed that to be master's degree student at Dartmouth College, passionate about globalization and human rights. So I can instantly see what your interests are. So the question was, I was wondering if nonprofits use this or if there were additional tools and sites I should use. I would say unilaterally my answer is always use LinkedIn as a default, but learn the other sites used for your field and your industry, because there are hundreds of professional associations, and oftentimes going to a professional association can be one of the best things you've ever done for your career. I started my career working for a professional association. I met people who walked into a professional association meeting as graduate students, went to a national committee meeting, and walked out with a leadership role, and so went from being, a student at Dartmouth College to the national young member contact for the organization within the space of 2 hours, and it looked fabulous on their resume. So always, always tag team that with figuring out what's important, and I think there are lots of opportunities in nonprofits. A couple organizations you might look into are the Society of Association Executives, and there's several other groups of nonprofit professionals that may also have social networks of their own. The question is how to build up online collaborations and relationships, not just for when you're looking for a job, but throughout the duration. I would say LinkedIn is one site, and certainly groups and professional associations. I think Twitter is also equally, if not a more powerful forum. One of the things that happens a lot on Twitter is people communicate via hashtags, which are pound symbols followed by a word under a common discussion. So let's say, somebody tell me a conference they attended last year.
Graduate Career Consortium.
Okay, so the Graduate Career Consortium is one I know well, and their acronym is GCC. So GCC might get together, and people who go to that meeting might all sit and write notes about what they're hearing in the presentation, and then use the code pound GCC 10. So anyone who wants to follow the thread of discussion that's going on, if you're missing the conference, can go to search Twitter under GCC 10 and find the stream of what's going on. And you can do that with current conferences in your field. And then if you can't go to something in your field, you can even write the people who are using those hashtags and engage in discussion with them. And that's something that's happening now all the time, which is very powerful, because it's a way for you to get in on conversations that you're missing when you're here. It's really important to complete your profile, and if you get stuck doing it, it's perfectly okay to be a snoop. There are probably 35 million profiles available on LinkedIn. You can do an advanced search to look at other people in terms of people who have similar industry interests or job titles, or you can even look at people who went to Dartmouth who have similar interests and experiences you do, and see how they write up their own experience, and that can give you ideas for how to write up your own. In terms of overall accounts, I recommend using a sexy headline like passionate about globalization and human rights, or something that says what you do, as opposed to just a straight I'm a student title, and a non-sexy picture. You know, so a sexy title, non-sexy picture. Now I'm going to go to something near and dear to my heart, and that's Twitter. How many of you are on Twitter? Two. Do you find it worthwhile? And
yeah, I'll just give a quick example of how I used it recently. I work in the public affairs office here, and I had been trading tweets with the sports editor of the New York Times, talking about Kevin Pierce, the local snowboarder who's injured, and some concussion issues. And I said, hey, I think I have a good story for you. Will you send me your email address? So this was a week or two ago. 2 days later, he had a reporter get in touch with me, and they're coming to do a story on Dartmouth that'll run on Saturday. So this was just through chatting on Twitter.
anyone else want to talk about Twitter a little bit? Or no? Okay. Twitter was started in March 2006 as a side project for a conference. And in December, a tweet, which is the form of communication that occurs on Twitter, was named as the word of the year. It's grown incredibly fast. Some people love it. Some people look at it with absolute skepticism and think it's about people talking about what they had for lunch. I find it to be incredibly exciting because of the momentum that can happen, like with my friend who started Job Angels. I think it can be incredibly powerful and a great way to have conversations with other people. It can also be the biggest time suck in the history of the world. So when I use it, I just finished a book about it. I spend an average of 30 minutes a day on it, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. The rest of the time I spend 15 minutes a day on it. You know, I do not recommend that it's something that you live and breathe on unless you plan to work on social media or you're in public affairs or communications. I do think, on the other hand, it can be an incredibly powerful way to find a position. And employers are increasingly turning to it to list positions because it's inexpensive. So for example, now it might cost an employer $400 to list one position on monster.com, which not as many people are logging into anymore because they don't know that it's working, versus there were over 300,000 positions posted by Tweet My Jobs in December 2009 alone. Because to post a position on Tweet My Jobs costs an employer $1 a day. So it's a big difference. Employers really like it and recruiters really like it because they can mention that they're looking for someone, and then if someone sees it, they can follow up with them instantaneously. So while we were in the course of researching our book, I talked to several recruiters who said they'd hired from Twitter, and one of them said she'd written something about how she was listening to the latest U2 CD or something, and she was getting ready to go to a meeting, and then when she came back, she was going to start going through resumes to hire a marketing associate. And by the time she got back, somebody had reached her through Facebook to say they were interested in the marketing associate position, and here was a link to their LinkedIn profile, and she ultimately hired that person for their savvy. Because I think it's a great way for employers to identify candidates. More than that, I think that Twitter is a fantastic way to connect with the world, because unlike LinkedIn or Facebook, it doesn't require a reciprocal relationship to connect. Unless a profile is blocked, you can follow anyone you want and anyone can follow you. As I mentioned a couple of days ago, in the process of researching for my book, I had to request some information from Eastman Kodak, and the chief marketing officer of Kodak got back to me in half an hour. I think there are a lot of key decision makers at companies, a lot of public affairs and press people, from whether you've got a problem with your iPhone or Comcast to employers potentially. It's a great way to connect with people and also to make friends with people in your field from all over the world. It's been described as a way to create your own tribe of people of interest who are often very interested in helping you out in your job search. You can find individual companies job boards, lists of employers. The best way to do that is through the Twitter job search guide. Through Twitter's search engine and that search.twitter.com, you can create keywords for searches for positions. And you can even create RSS feeds that when people, when those positions come up, those will be emailed to you through other different directories. So it's a pretty exciting platform through directories such as WeFollow and Twello, which is the Twello Twitter Yellow Pages. You can find people to follow. And Twitter also recently unveiled something called lists, which allow you to subscribe to groups of people without individually following them. So for example, if I want to know what career experts are talking about, but I don't want to subscribe and monitor 200 different accounts, I can just click with the button, with a click, follow a list and view people that way. So it's a really nice way to connect with people. In terms of luring employers, you can say interesting things that generate their attention. You can engage in active discussions with others, and you can have a really pithy short bio that describes your interests. So for example, before we started today, I was talking to a PhD from Thayer. For example, if she says she's studying her specialty in the South Pole, or she's studying from New England to the South Pole, that's going to gather somebody's attention and make them want to click through and learn about her. I think that's the equivalent of a really sexy headline. You can also keep in touch with trends in your field. For example, there's a new website called tweetfeel.com. I think it's Tweetfeel, which basically you can type in a company name and then you see instantly the different reactions to that particular company, whether it's positive or negative. So, and this is more of an individual thing, but if you typed in Tiger Woods, you can see how many positive comments he has versus how many negative comments. Or if you type in, let's say you're applying for a position at McKinsey, and you want to know what people are thinking about McKinsey on that particular day, it will scan through the language with the algorithms, pick up the assessments, and show you the positive press versus the negative press. And Twitter's kind of like the iPhone. It has hundreds of apps that you can use to use it. And in fact, something like 60% of Twitter users do their Twitter interface entirely outside of Twitter. People on Twitter use pound symbols to talk in discussions. And one of the most important things on Twitter is not just to talk about work. Signing up on Twitter is much quicker than LinkedIn. It will take you about half an hour max. To set up a basic account, it takes about 2 minutes. This is the sign-in screen. To create settings, or in the settings menu, you can create a bio, which is you get 160 characters to describe yourself. Again, it asks for a URL. If you don't have a website, you can list your LinkedIn profile, which is a great way to connect with employers. You can also, it will ask you for a design for your background. They have some designs on the site. There are also a number of sites that can help you with designs. And again, a standard picture is necessary, but that's a better one or a more appropriate one to use artwork or a caricature of yourself if that's what you wish to use. And a lot of people will use avatars on Twitter as well. It's good to use your own name if you're interested in it as a serious tool for your job search, but all of your tweets or communications get indexed by Google and by Bing. So you want to be sure about that too. Your handout includes general information on how to create your Twitter account, customize your background section, and begin posting. So I wanted to wrap up today with just talking about the laws of attraction and using these social media applications. So I guess for me, the feeling is often if I'm sitting in the audience, okay, this is a lot of information to process. Which sites do I join? How much time is it going to take? And why do I need to do it? And I would say, in general, I really encourage you to pick the applications and the sites that make the most sense to you, that people in your profession are actively using and that you know you enjoy personally. I had a client in my private work who I encouraged to get on Twitter, and she looked at me as if I had 3 heads, because she said, look, you know, I spend 80 hours a week at work as it is. On my weekends, I like to fly on the trapeze. That was her hobby. She said, I have no interest in spending another second online, and no one I want to work with does either. So I said, fine. That makes perfect sense. You don't have to be on Twitter to get a job. But at the same time, for a lot of people, it makes a lot of sense. And for example, for you, it landed a big media coup very quickly. It's a way to get in touch with influencers. LinkedIn is a way to be found by employers, and it's certainly, when employers are ready to make a hiring decision, it's something that they're going to look at. Again, as a baseline, I think monitoring your presence is the most important thing, and secondarily, it's deciding how much you want to get known, but especially if you're in a field where it's either commonly misunderstood, the type of research that you're doing, and people don't understand how your work relates to other fields and other disciplines and how your skills transfer across industry sectors, it's a great opportunity to use social media to take the time to explain that information to other people, because when you show you can articulate what you do in layman's terms, that can make a very powerful case for getting hired. And I think conversely, just participating in the overall dialogues can help you gain visibility that you might not get in other forums, and can help you get known a lot faster in terms of your overall job search. So again, I think I included this law of attraction here, that he catches the best fish who angles with a golden hook. So really, you know, using stories about going to the South Pole and some of, you know, or researching in the ice lab at Thayer School, or some of the things that you do at Dartmouth that other people don't do, is really important. And the more platforms that you participate in, again, you can have a consistent presence so it doesn't take a lot of your time, the more exposure you're going to get. And I think that's very helpful as well. And finally, I'm going to leave you with 5 ways to use social media in your job search, some of which you've already heard. Again, Facebook is to let your friends know of your interests and what you're looking for. LinkedIn and Twitter are a great opportunity to showcase your skills and areas of expertise. If you want extra credit, sometimes starting a blog can be a great way to go if you're interested in writing and enjoy that type of thing. Engaging in discussions and sparking dialogue. Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter are great for having online debates and also showcasing what you know and your expertise. And I think that as graduate students and students at Dartmouth College, you have a lot to share in terms of taking what you're learning here in Hanover offline and making that voice in the wilderness heard around the girdled earth. So I think it's a good opportunity to do that. And finally, it can be a valuable source of monitoring job postings and potential leads. And we'll be talking about that next week. But the image that I want you to leave you with is the image we talked about briefly on Tuesday. And that's the image. This seagull was filmed stealing Doritos on numerous times in Scotland. And as I mentioned before on Tuesday, you don't want to be a seagull with social media. So the overall goal is to be sharing and to be reciprocal with other people, because seagulls, I mean, not all of them, but they have a nasty reputation for only dropping by when they need something, and probably the least effective approach that you can use in your job search is to only ask for specific help, being, you know, I need a job when you need it. But it's so much better karma if you're giving help and sharing information all along, because then when you need it, it's going to come to you in spades.